The black badge was clipped to my daughter's dress before I understood what it meant. Guest. I was Miles Calder, the exhibit builder who had spent 11 months restoring the Harcourt Museum for its centenary gala. June was my 9-year-old daughter, and Lucia Harcourt, the woman I was supposed to announce our engagement beside before 10 that night, crossed the marble entrance just as a guard stopped June from following the gold-pinned Harcourt family toward their portrait. Lucia looked at the badge, then at her grandmother. She caught the gold enamel family pin on her burgundy gown, pulled hard enough to bend its clasp, and pressed it over the word on June's chest. "If she is a guest," Lucia said, "so am I." The quartet near the staircase did not stop playing. That made the silence around us feel chosen. June touched the crooked gold pin with one finger. "That looked expensive." "It was badly attached," Lucia said. That was Lucia's version of humor when she was furious, dry enough to preserve evidence. The woman standing behind the registration table did not laugh. Margaret Harcourt was Lucia's grandmother, 72, silver-haired and chair of the cultural trust that owned the museum. She had approved my restoration contract, supervised the gala, and controlled the succession vote scheduled after the family portrait. The relatives behind her wore identical gold pins. None of their clasps were bent. "Lucia," Margaret said, "remove it from the child. Her name is June. The pin grants access to the family archive corridor and the portrait platform. It is not jewelry." I stepped beside June. The registrar's hand still hovered near the stack of black badges, as though she had merely followed a list and hoped the list could take responsibility. "Who classified my daughter as a guest?" I asked. Margaret answered without looking at the registrar. "The centenary uses legal household categories. You are not married to Lucia. June is not Lucia's legal dependent. She was invited to the engagement announcement. She is invited to the gala." Margaret's gaze moved to the black satin under Lucia's pin. "That is what the badge says." June slipped her hand into mine. She did not cry. Since her mother died 4 years earlier, she had become skilled at protecting adults from the sight of her first reaction. I had once called that resilience. Lately, I had begun to recognize it as unpaid work. Lucia crouched so she and June were level. Her long dark hair had been swept into a loose, low twist for the gala. One strand had fallen across her cheek when she tore off the pin. "May I take the black badge off?" she asked. June looked at Margaret. "Will the guard let me through if you do?" The guard's expression tightened. He was not a villain. He had been given a gold pin rule, and Margaret had just confirmed it in front of him. Lucia rose. "She comes with us." Margaret folded both hands over the head of her cane. She used it after a hip operation, not as theater, which somehow made the stillness sharper. "The portrait platform is governed by the trust charter. Tonight's image enters the permanent centenary archive. Legal descendants and spouses only. The engagement announcement changes that. An announcement is not a marriage." "No," I said, "it is not." Lucia turned toward me. She had expected resistance from Margaret. She had not expected those 4 words from me. For 3 months, she and I had discussed tonight as if the announcement were a door. We would walk through it together. The trust would stop speaking of June as my accompanying child. Margaret would have to accept that Lucia had chosen a family not listed in the Harcourt genealogy. I had believed Lucia because she was usually right about systems. She knew where decisions were made, which signature mattered, and how long a polite no remained negotiable. But June had been given the badge before the announcement. Someone had planned for the door to stay closed. A man in a dinner jacket approached from the central gallery carrying a dark green folder. I recognized him as Arthur Wynne, the trust's commercial director, because he had negotiated my workshop's original restoration contract. Before he could speak, Margaret introduced the leverage herself. "Mr. Wynne has your extension," she told me. "The East Wing exhibits begin next month. 12 more months of work for Calder Studio." Arthur stopped 2 paces away. He knew enough to keep the folder closed. My workshop employed 4 people besides me. 12 months meant salaries, health coverage, and enough space in the schedule to stop bidding on every poorly lit corporate lobby that wanted history without dust. I had promised my team an answer by Monday. June looked from the folder to me. She knew what green folders meant. My contracts lived in green folders because she had chosen the color when she was 6, and tired of seeing me lose invoices beneath her school papers. "Is that the job?" she asked. "It is an offer," I said. Margaret's eyes stayed on mine. "A valuable one." Lucia moved between Arthur and me. "Not here. It was always meant to be signed tonight," Margaret replied. "The family program, the succession vote, and the commercial renewal have shared a schedule for 6 weeks." "Shared a schedule," June repeated softly. "Not a reason." Margaret heard her. For the first time, something uncertain passed through her expression. Lucia unfastened the black badge from June's dress. The gold pin remained attached to it, its bent clasp caught through both layers of satin. She placed the joined badges in June's palm. "Keep them together," Lucia said. "No one gets to pretend they were separate decisions." June closed her fingers around them. At the far end of the entrance hall, a photographer called for the first family group to assemble. Gold pins moved toward the restricted corridor. The music rose. Donors continued arriving beneath the chandeliers, greeted by staff who had no idea whether to point us toward the ballroom or the exit. I had spent a year building clean pathways through this museum. A visitor could move from the founding collection to the modern wing without meeting a locked door or an unexplained century. Yet I had brought my daughter to the one threshold designed to make her ask what she was allowed to be. "We should leave," I said. Lucia's jaw tightened. "If you leave now, Margaret controls the explanation. If we stay, June becomes the explanation." June stared at the 2 badges in her hand. "Can I choose somewhere that isn't in front of everyone?" "That settled it." Lucia nodded once and turned to the registrar. "Open the West Service Gallery." The registrar glanced at Margaret. "Naomi Bell controls internal access," Margaret said. "Not you." Naomi was the Trust's operations director, the person responsible for event access, staff safety, and the electronic approval system. Lucia took out her phone and called her by name. She did not claim authority she did not have. "Naomi, this is Lucia. I need a private route to the West Gallery for Miles and June. No press, no portrait access, and no category override. Can you authorize it?" The answer came quickly enough that Lucia ended the call and faced the guard. "Naomi is opening the staff door herself." Margaret watched us move away from the gold corridor. "The succession vote remains at 10. Lucia did not turn back. "Then the board can decide whether it wants a successor who follows a badge into the wrong room." June walked between us. The black satin and bent gold pin clicked softly inside her closed hand. Behind us, Arthur still held the green contract folder. For once, I did not ask him to bring it along. Naomi Bell met us at the staff door with a ring of keys, and no expression meant for donors. She was 41, the Trust's operations director for 9 years, and the person whose name appeared beneath every access plan I had used during the restoration. Tonight she wore a plain black suit with a bronze staff pin, visibly different from both the family gold and the guest satin. Her authority came from the building, not the bloodline. "The West Gallery is closed until 7:45, she said. "You have 12 minutes before the lighting crew returns." "Thank you," Lucia replied. Naomi looked at June. "Do you want me to record that the registrar removed your badge?" June opened her hand. Lucia removed it. She added something first. The bent gold pin lay across the black word. Naomi's eyes moved to Lucia's empty neckline. "I see." She did not say she was sorry for an order she had not yet verified. She unlocked the door, told us where the nearest quiet restroom was, and left us with a promise to return after checking the approval history. Competence was calming when it did not arrive dressed as rescue. The West Gallery held the exhibit my team had finished that morning. 5 suspended frames showing how the Harcourt collection had changed hands across a century. Warm work lights glowed beneath linen dust covers. My fingerprints were still visible on the brass level beside the final case. June sat on a packing crate and placed the linked badges on her sketchbook. Lucia remained standing. "I knew Margaret objected to the portrait," she said. "I waited. Not the badge," she continued. "Not the corridor. She told me the board wanted the engagement announced after the succession vote. I told her it would happen before, because you thought a public announcement would force them to include June." "Yes." June drew one line across a blank page. "So I was the surprise part." Lucia flinched. She moved closer, then stopped beyond arm's reach. "You were never a surprise to me." "To them," I thought if they saw us together. They have seen us together, I said. At dinner, at the lake house, at your father's memorial, Margaret did not need a better view. Lucia's mouth closed. For a year, she had been steady with June in ways cameras could not measure. She knew which brand of adhesive bandage did not make June's skin itch. She attended cello recitals and sat in the back because June hated adults who waved from the audience. When nightmares returned around the anniversary of my wife Anna's death, Lucia did not ask June to call her anything. She made cocoa, checked the windows twice, and slept on the sofa so I could stay beside my daughter. That history was why the badge hurt. Lucia had earned private trust, then risked it in a public strategy she had not explained. Why didn't you tell me the portrait was disputed? I asked. Because you would have kept June home. I might have, and Margaret would have called that proof that you do not intend to join this family. We are not applying to become Harcourts. Lucia looked toward the covered frames. I am. The sentence landed without accusation. That made it more honest. Lucia had spent 12 years trying to turn a private collection into a public institution, without surrendering it to relatives who treated both words as tax categories. The succession vote would give her authority to separate the executive director's office from Margaret's chairmanship. If she lost, the modernization plan could stall for years. I had known the stakes. I had not known she had folded June into them. June tapped her pencil against the black badge. Can I ask a rude question? Please, Lucia said. If you win, do I become family? Lucia took a breath. No vote should decide that. Then why did I have to come before it? I looked away first. The green contract folder appeared through the glass door. Arthur stood outside without entering, waiting to be acknowledged. He was not part of our family dispute. He was responsible for securing the museum's next installation before vendors booked other work. I opened the door. Margaret asked me to give this to you privately, he said. I can return later. Is the offer conditional on tonight's announcement? Arthur hesitated. The commercial committee approved Calder Studio. The chair added a reputation clause this afternoon. What reputation? He opened the folder and showed me a single paragraph flagged with a brass tab. The exact legal wording ran smaller than I could comfortably read without my glasses, but Arthur explained it plainly. Public disputes involving trust principles may trigger termination if they materially affect the institution. Lucia came to the door. That clause was not in the committee draft. No, Arthur said. Did Margaret instruct you to add it? She instructed counsel. I was told the revision was approved. Lucia looked at me. The contract was not payment for accepting June's badge. It was cleaner than that and therefore more dangerous. I could sign now, then spend a year wondering whether every disagreement with the Harcourts placed 4 salaries inside Margaret's hand. My first instinct was to take the folder home, read it after June slept, negotiate the clause on Monday, preserve options. Those phrases had built much of my adult life. They sounded responsible because fear often used my professional vocabulary. I removed the unsigned extension from the folder. Arthur, the current installation remains under warranty, I said. My team will complete every obligation. We are declining the East Wing. His eyebrows rose. You do not need to decide tonight. Apparently I do. I put the pages back and closed the folder. June stopped tapping her pencil. Lucia did not thank me. That mattered. A decision about my daughter's dignity was not a gift to my fiancé. Arthur accepted the folder. I'll record that the extension was declined before execution. Your existing contract is unaffected. Send that confirmation to my studio manager as well. I will. After he left, June asked, Does that mean your team loses their jobs? They still have their current jobs, I said. It means I have to find our next project sooner. Because of me. Because I accepted a contract that let someone bargain with how I behave around you. I crouched in front of the crate. That part belongs to me. June studied my face. Are you going to be worried and pretend you are? Almost certainly. Good, I don't like surprise worrying. Lucia sat on the opposite end of the crate, leaving space between them. Neither do I. The gallery door opened again. Naomi entered carrying a tablet, but she did not raise it until Lucia nodded. The access matrix was approved 11 days ago, Naomi said. Margaret requested the legal household categories. My office built them. Final executive approval came from your account, Lucia. Lucia went still. I did not approve a child guest restriction. You approved the packet containing it. Naomi's tone remained even. I can show you the page and authentication record. There is no evidence your account was used by anyone else. The gold pin seemed brighter against the black badge between us. Margaret had designed the rule. Naomi's team had built it. Lucia had authorized it, and I had arrived prepared to smile through it for a contract. June closed her sketchbook over both badges. So, she said, nobody gets to act surprised anymore. Naomi turned the tablet toward Lucia. The approval page showed a grid of colored access categories: gold family, bronze staff, black guest. The dependent line sat near the bottom beneath catering restrictions and archive capacity. Lucia's name appeared beside a date and a time just after midnight. I remember the packet, Lucia said. The insurance certificate had to reach the city by 9 the next morning. I reviewed the fire plan and the capacity table. I approved the rest together. Naomi did not soften the fact. The family category was in the rest. Yes. Lucia handed the tablet back. She had a dozen possible defenses. Margaret had requested the categories. Naomi's office had written them. Counsel had buried the definition in a long packet. None changed whose approval allowed the registrar to clip that badge to June. Who else knows? Lucia asked. Margaret requested the authentication record 10 minutes ago. Then she is waiting for me to blame her publicly. Probably, Naomi said. For clarity, I built the matrix and should have flagged the dependent rule separately. I will state that in any review. You will not carry my approval for me. Naomi held Lucia's gaze. I wasn't offering. That was the first time June smiled all evening. Lucia looked at me. I need to tell the board before Margaret does. You need to tell June first. She sat beside the crate again. I approved the system that gave you that badge. I did not notice the rule. I should have, especially because I knew my grandmother was arguing about the portrait. June's fingers rested on the closed sketchbook. Did you think the boring pages couldn't hurt anyone? Lucia exhaled through her nose. Something close to that. Dad says boring pages are where people hide expensive mistakes. Your father is irritatingly correct. Only at work, June said. I accepted the injury. Lucia continued. I am going to correct what I approved, but I am not going to use you in a speech, and I will not ask you to stand on the portrait platform. Even with the pin, especially with the pin. I gave it to you because I chose you. I should not turn that choice into a performance you owe me. June opened the sketchbook and placed the badges on the page. She had drawn the entrance hall as 3 doors. One gold, one black, one without a color. Can we use the door without a badge? She asked. That is the staff door, Naomi said. June considered it. Staff seems more useful than family tonight. Naomi's mouth almost moved. Often. The lighting crew's voices sounded beyond the gallery. Our 12 minutes were ending. Naomi offered us a quiet office on the 2nd floor, but Lucia shook her head. I need to cancel the portrait announcement now. She called the gala producer in front of us. She explained that the engagement segment was withdrawn and the family portrait would proceed without her. She did not say scheduling conflict. She did not call it a private matter. She said the access policy affecting her future stepdaughter was under dispute, and she would not place June on the platform as an exception. When the call ended, a tremor passed through Lucia's hand. She hid it by reaching for the pin, then stopped before touching June's sketchbook. May I? She asked. June pushed the book toward her. Lucia lifted the joined badges. The gold pin's bent clasp had torn a small crescent in the black satin. My father gave me this when I joined the trust, she said. He told me it meant I would always have a place here. Margaret's fear had a history. Lucia's mother had left when Lucia was 7, after using the family name to guarantee debts the trust later paid. Several cousins had treated museum apartments, cars, and archives as private property. Margaret responded by turning belonging into a category she could audit. Lucia had told me those facts before. She had never used them to excuse her grandmother. Tonight, they explained why a bent pin could frighten Margaret more than a wounded child embarrassed her. Did it work? June asked. Lucia looked at the pin. Sometimes a place is not the same as a home. That sounded prepared. It was. I have had a difficult grandmother for a long time. The gallery door opened without a knock. Margaret entered alone. Naomi stepped between her and the tablet. This room is temporarily assigned to the Calders. Margaret's gaze sharpened. I chair the trust, and I control room assignments during an active event. You may ask them to admit you. Margaret looked at me. I asked June. She shrugged once. She can come in if she doesn't call me the child. June, Margaret said. May I enter? June nodded. Margaret crossed the threshold and remained standing. The engagement announcement has been removed from the program. Yes, Lucia said. That was reckless. Approving your category without reading it was reckless. Margaret had prepared for denial. The admission left her with nowhere to place the tablet she carried. You signed it, she said. I did. Then do not imply that I ambushed you. You intended the badge to force a choice. So did you. You brought Miles and June to a disputed family ceremony because you expected affection to defeat procedure in public. Lucia's silence admitted that part. Margaret turned to me. And you accepted the museum contract while courting the executive director. After an independent committee selected my studio, you still accepted it. Yes, I also declined the extension 5 minutes ago. That reached her. Her fingers tightened on the tablet. Arthur had no authority to withdraw it. He did not, I did. Margaret studied me as if a quiet craftsman had become a structural fault. She had always mistaken my patience for appetite. 4 employees will share your principle, she said. They will share the truth tomorrow morning. Then I will find work that does not require my daughter to wear a warning label. June leaned toward me. That part sounded prepared. It was. A little dramatic. I am under stress. Lucia's brief laugh broke through before she could stop it. Even Naomi looked down. Margaret did not laugh, but the anger in her face changed shape. You think this is about disliking June, isn't it? I asked. No, it is about preventing private affection from rewriting public obligations. Lucia may marry. She may become a stepmother. Until she does, the trust cannot certify feelings as legal facts. The guard did not ask June for a legal opinion. He stopped her while every gold pin walked past. Margaret's voice lowered. Then marry first. Announce later. Do not demand that a 100-year institution improvise because a child is disappointed. June closed the sketchbook. I'm not disappointed, she said. I'm informed. Margaret looked at her fully then. June stood and handed Lucia the linked badges. You should keep these until the adults decide whether they are rules or weapons. Lucia accepted them with both hands. The distinction mattered because Lucia could not repair the policy by changing June's badge. She had to challenge the category while accepting that her own approval had made it enforceable. The succession vote was still 3 hours away. The family portrait was in 90 minutes. And for the first time that night, the object Margaret had used to define June was back in the hands of the person whose signature had made it possible. We left the West Gallery through the same staff door and entered the museum's conservation workshop. June chose a stool beside my tool chest. Lucia stood across from me with the linked badges in one hand. Go to your board, I said, not without deciding what happens to us. Nothing useful happens to us in the next 10 minutes. That is usually how people postpone saying something final. I'm trying not to say something final while June is sitting 3 feet away. June raised a hand. I can sit farther away. No, we said together. She lowered it, promising start. I pulled a clean cloth over the sharp tools on the bench. Small physical tasks had always helped me sort anger from fear. Tonight the difference mattered. I was angry that Lucia had approved the rule and hidden the portrait dispute. I was afraid that those choices revealed how our marriage would work whenever her family created pressure. Lucia would make a plan, I would endure it, and June would learn the truth at the door. I love you, Lucia said. That is not my defense. Good. I believed I could force Margaret to acknowledge what was already true in our private life, by putting June where Margaret had to reject her publicly. Yes, the word came without decoration. I need time, I said. Lucia nodded. You have it. And the wedding date is no longer fixed. Her fingers closed around the badges. Pain crossed her face, but she did not bargain. All right. June looked at both of us. Does that mean canceled? It means we do not marry while we are still learning whether we can make family decisions without using you as the deadline, I said. That answer had too many pieces. It means not yet, Lucia said. June accepted that. Naomi arrived with 2 paper cups of water and news. The board's governance committee had seen Lucia's canceled announcement. Margaret had called an emergency briefing for 9:15, before the 10 o'clock succession vote. Naomi had also frozen changes to the access matrix, so the original approval record would remain intact. What authority do you have to freeze it? I asked. Event operations and records preservation, she said. I cannot change the family rule. I can prevent anyone from quietly changing tonight's evidence. Lucia gave her the joined badges. Log these with photographs, then return them to June. They belong to her. June shook her head. Not during the party. Naomi waited. Can you keep them somewhere nobody can wear them? June asked. Yes, only then did June release the objects. Margaret's invitation came 10 minutes later. She asked to meet in the founder's salon, a small room beside the portrait platform. Naomi confirmed the room and offered to attend. Margaret refused. Lucia insisted. Margaret accepted after Naomi clarified that any discussion of access policy during an active event fell within her role. The salon contained more family faces than furniture. Painted harcourts watched from dark frames while technicians tested flashes through the open doors. At the center table sat 3 objects: a new gold badge printed with June's name, the green contract folder, and a cream envelope holding the revised engagement schedule. Margaret had converted belonging into a package. This is a temporary resolution, she said. June receives family access tonight as Lucia's designated household guest. The portrait caption will identify her accurately. Miles signs the commercial extension without the added reputation clause. The engagement announcement moves to next spring, after the marriage. After the marriage, Lucia asked. A private ceremony may occur whenever you choose. Publicly, the trust announces nothing until legal status matches the archive. June looked at the gold badge. It was almost identical to the relatives' badges, except for a small white stripe at the bottom. What does the stripe mean? She asked. Margaret answered, designated guest. So it is a black badge dressed up. Margaret's lips tightened. It grants the same access tonight. Then why make a new one? Because symbols matter. June glanced at Lucia's empty neckline. I noticed. I opened the contract folder. The reputation clause had been removed. The fee would cover my workshop for a year and fund 2 apprenticeships. This version was clean enough to sign. The cost had simply moved outside the pages. What do you need from us? I asked. Margaret's gaze did not shift. No public accusation tonight. Lucia tells the board the access issue was an administrative misunderstanding. You and June join the portrait under the temporary badge. The review happens after the centenary. Naomi spoke for the first time. It was not an administrative misunderstanding. Your office built the matrix, at your request with Lucia's approval. That is an administrative chain, not a misunderstanding. Margaret ignored her. Miles, your employees should not pay for a family disagreement. That was true. It was also why the offer worked. I thought of the 4 people who had stayed late all month. I thought of June asking whether my worry would arrive as a surprise. A responsible decision did not require pretending only one cost existed. I closed the folder. I will tell my team I declined this before you made the second offer, I said. They deserve to know the risk I removed and the risk I created. But I will not sign a contract presented beside my daughter's upgraded badge. Margaret's voice cooled. Pride is expensive. So is leverage. I slid the folder back. Lucia picked up the cream envelope and tore the revised announcement schedule once through the center. Unlike the family pin, she did it slowly. There will be no private ceremony used to make your archive comfortable, she said. And no spring announcement scheduled before Miles and June trust me again. Margaret looked toward the portrait platform. Then you will lose the vote. I am not asking the board to elect me tonight. That surprised all of us. Lucia continued. At the portrait, I will disclose my approval of the matrix and request an independent governance review. I will not vote on my succession, and I will not accept appointment while the review is open. You would suspend the trust's transition over a badge. over the executive director approving a family access rule she did not read, then planning to use a child's presence to defeat it. Margaret's face lost color. You will damage the institution your father left you. My father left me work. You turned it into a test of obedience. For a moment, Margaret looked older than 72. Not fragile, tired in a way command had hidden. Your mother used the family name to open every door she later abandoned, she said. I spent 20 years closing them. Lucia's expression softened, but her position did not. June is not my mother. Everyone is permanent while they are asking to enter. June stepped closer to the table. I didn't ask. Margaret looked at her. Lucia brought me, June continued. Dad let her. You stopped me. Everyone keeps saying I am trying to get inside something. She pushed the gold-striped badge back toward Margaret. I want to go home. The portrait technician called for the Harcourt principals to take their positions. Lucia looked at June, then at me. I need 5 minutes on that platform. Not with June, not as proof. I need to say what I signed before the board votes. I wanted to take my daughter through the nearest exit. I also knew leaving would let Margaret describe Lucia's disclosure as a private emotional scene the institution had survived. June decides whether we stay, I said. June considered the open doors and the rows of gold pins assembling beyond them. We stay near the exit, she said, and nobody points at me. Lucia nodded, agreed. Naomi pocketed the sealed evidence sleeve containing the black badge and bent pin. Then she opened the salon doors. The family portrait waited under white lights. Lucia walked toward it without a family emblem on her dress. The portrait platform had been built to make hierarchy look like composition. Margaret's chair stood at the center. Senior relatives were arranged by generation on shallow steps. A brass mark at Margaret's right had been reserved for Lucia. Beyond it, the spacing left room for a husband but not a child. June and I remained beside the west exit as promised. Naomi stood near the event producer, not beside us. Her role was to preserve the event record, not lend our decision institutional approval. The ballroom lights lowered. The photographer lifted his hand. Lucia stepped onto her brass mark without the gold pin. Before you take this photograph, she said, the trust needs an accurate caption. The photographer lowered his camera. Relatives shifted, but the donors farther back could not yet hear. Lucia took the microphone from the portrait presenter and faced the room. She did not point toward June. 11 days ago, I approved the centenary access matrix, she said. That matrix classified my future stepdaughter as a guest and barred her from this platform. My grandmother requested the category. Operations implemented it. I gave final executive approval without reading the dependent rules. The event producer moved toward the sound controls. Naomi shook her head once. The microphone remained live. Margaret rose from her chair. This is a governance matter, not a gala address. It became a gala matter when the rule was placed on a child's dress at the public entrance. Lucia's voice did not rise. She named the decision, the chain, and her part in it. No speech about love could replace those facts. I also brought Miles and June tonight knowing the portrait category was disputed. I believed our engagement announcement would force a resolution. That used June's presence as leverage. I apologized to her privately and publicly, but she owes this room no appearance and no forgiveness. June's grip tightened around my hand. Several cameras turned toward the exit. I moved half a step in front of her. Lucia noticed. Do not photograph June, she said into the microphone. Her refusal to stand here is not part of the trust's publicity. The cameras turned back. One reporter lowered her phone entirely. Another kept filming Lucia. The room's attention shifted from the child who had been marked to the executive who had signed. That choice cost Lucia the easiest image of redemption. It also made her apology believable. She addressed the trustees seated below the platform. I withdraw from tonight's succession vote. I request an independent review of executive approvals, family access categories, and the chair's power to add commercial conditions during private disputes. Until that review is complete, I will accept suspension from access and event decisions. One trustee asked whether she was resigning. No, Lucia said. Resignation would remove me from the consequences and leave the same system in place. I am submitting to review. Margaret's face hardened. And what policy do you propose instead? Sentiment at the door. No, a published household access standard developed with legal, foster, adoptive, blended, and caregiving families. No private exceptions. No blood-only symbol pretending to be neutral governance. You would let temporary relationships into a permanent archive. Lucia looked toward the empty space beside her. The archive already contains temporary marriages, estranged descendants and relatives who stole from it. Duration is not the same as worth. The sentence cut because it included her own family, not because it defeated Margaret neatly. Margaret turned her gaze toward me, and Mr. Calder's commercial interest. I had hoped to remain beside June, but silence had been my contribution long before that evening. I asked her, "May I answer?" She nodded. "Don't make me stand there." "I won't." I walked only as far as the aisle microphone. June stayed beside the exit where she could leave without crossing the ballroom. Calder's studio declined the East Wing extension before Margaret offered a private badge change. I said, "Our current warranty work will be completed. We will not bid on new Harcourt projects during the review." Arthur Wynne, still holding the green folder at the edge of the platform, inclined his head to confirm it. "I also knew this family had treated June as provisional before tonight," I continued. "Not with a badge, with invitations addressed to me plus child, with photographs cropped for formal copies, with conversations that stopped when she entered. I accepted those things because I wanted stability and the contract helped my workshop. That was my decision. I will not describe myself as surprised by the system I kept asking my daughter to tolerate." June looked at me without smiling. She was listening for ownership, not performance. Margaret rested both hands on her cane. "So the evening becomes a confession by every adult except the one whose feelings control it." June spoke from the exit. She did not need the microphone. The room had gone still enough to hear her. "My feelings don't control it. Your badges do." Lucia stepped off the brass mark. "Then there will be no family portrait tonight," she said. Margaret's head lifted. "You cannot cancel a centenary record because you dislike its boundaries. I cannot cancel the relative's photograph. I can refuse to let the trust label it the complete Harcourt family. Take it as a historical image of the people who accepted the rule." She walked down the steps and stopped several feet from June. Naomi removed the clear evidence sleeve from her pocket. "June asked me to hold these," she said. "They remain hers." June accepted the sleeve. Through the plastic, the gold pin covered part of the black word. The bent clasp was clearly visible. Lucia did not reach for it. "Do you want the pin back?" June asked. "I want you to decide when it is not surrounded by cameras." June opened the sleeve anyway. She separated the gold pin from the torn black satin and placed the pin in Lucia's palm. "I'm not giving it back because she was right," June said, glancing at Margaret. "I'm giving it back because I don't want to wear the thing you lost." Lucia closed her hand around it. "All right. And don't tear it off again. Fix the clasp." "All right." June held on to the guest badge. The photographer waited. Margaret looked at the assembled relatives, at Lucia standing below the platform, and at the empty brass mark beside her chair. "Take the photograph," she said. The flash went off. Lucia did not turn to watch. We left through the west exit together, though not hand in hand. Outside, rain had polished the museum steps black. The gala music continued behind the doors, and the succession vote did not happen at 10. At the curb, Lucia stopped before the car. "I will stay at my apartment tonight," she said. "Naomi will send the review notice in the morning. I will not contact June unless she asks or you agree." "Thank you," I said. It was not forgiveness. It was a boundary honored without argument. June opened the back door, then looked at Lucia. "You can text me when the pin is fixed." Lucia's face changed, but she kept her voice steady. "Only then. You can text Dad about the other stuff." "Understood." As we drove away, June laid the black guest badge on her sketchbook. The satin had a crescent tear where Lucia's pin had gone through it. The hole was small. It was also the first honest opening the Harcourts had made all night. The trust announced Lucia's suspension on Monday morning. It was not ceremonial. She lost approval access, event authority, and her place on the governance committee, while an outside nonprofit council reviewed the centenary matrix, commercial clause, and chair's discretionary powers. Naomi remained operations director and submitted her own record of failing to flag the dependent category. Margaret stayed chair during the first month, but every instruction she issued had to be copied to 2 independent trustees. Lucia did not call that victory. I told my workshop team about the declined extension before they could read the gala report online. I showed them the original clean committee offer, the added reputation clause, and the private version Margaret put beside June's gold-striped badge. I expected anger. I received arithmetic. When June asked whether I was worried, I showed her the schedule. "That is a lot of yellow," she said. "Yellow means possible. It looks nervous." "That is because I highlighted it." She added 1 green mark beside the library opening. "Now it looks like a plan." Lucia and I met with a counselor the following week. We did not discuss a new wedding date. We discussed why she equated decisive action with safety and why I equated silence with provision. Neither habit began at the gala. The gala had only made them visible enough to wear. June joined 2 sessions after the counselor explained that she could leave at any time and was not responsible for keeping us together. In the first, she said Lucia asked permission for hugs, but not for public strategies. In the second, she said I apologized well after decisions I should have prevented. Both statements were accurate. Lucia repaired the gold pin herself badly, then took it to a jeweler. The new clasp was stronger and slightly darker than the original. She sent June 1 photograph, as promised. No message about family. No question about when she could come home. June replied with a photograph of the black guest badge, inside a clear pencil pouch. The independent review lasted 5 months. The final policy did not declare everyone family and did not turn archive access into sentiment. It separated 3 things the old badge system had collapsed: legal authority over trust assets, household participation in public events, and access to private records. Legal control stayed governed by law. Household invitations could include stepchildren, foster children, long-term caregivers, and declared partners under a published standard. Archive access depended on preservation rules, not surnames or jewelry. The board also removed the chair's power to insert commercial conditions without committee approval. Naomi introduced a second review flag for any event rule involving children or household status. She accepted a formal reprimand for the centenary packet and kept her job. Margaret resigned as chair at the end of the review but remained a trustee without operational authority. She did not transform into a warm grandmother. She did something harder for her. She signed the governance changes, issued a public correction stating that June had been inappropriately classified, and stopped referring to the incident as disappointment. The first time she visited my workshop afterward, she came alone and waited at the front desk. "I need a frame," she said. "We are not accepting Harcourt contracts. This is personal. I will pay the public rate." She placed a copy of the centenary portrait on the counter. The empty brass mark beside her chair was visible. Lucia stood below the platform at the edge of the image, caught just before she walked out of frame. "Why frame this?" I asked. "Because it records the rule accurately." That was not remorse, but it was no longer denial. I quoted the same rate I would have given any customer. Margaret paid the deposit. When she collected the finished frame, she asked whether June would accept a letter. "You can send it," I said. "She decides whether to read it." June read it 2 weeks later. Margaret did not ask to be forgiven. She described why she had built rules after Lucia's mother left and admitted she had started treating uncertainty as evidence of bad intent. June wrote back 1 sentence: "Rules should stop stealing, not stop people." Margaret kept the sentence. She did not put it on a brochure. Lucia returned to the trust after the review with reduced authority. The board separated the heiress's expected succession from the executive director's job and opened the next appointment to outside candidates. Lucia applied. She won a 3-year term by a vote that did not include Margaret, and the minutes recorded her centenary failure beside her qualifications. She came to our house that evening carrying takeout and no pin. "Did you lose it again?" June asked. "It is in my bag. I did not know whether wearing it here would feel like a claim." June considered that. "Good answer." Lucia waited on the porch until June invited her inside. We did not resume where we had stopped. Lucia rented her apartment for another 6 months. We rebuilt ordinary things: grocery lists, school pickups, visits that were not scheduled around trust events. When the library exhibit opened, she attended after public hours and asked my team about the work instead of congratulating me for surviving without her family's contract. 9 months after the gala, I asked Lucia whether she still wanted to marry me. "Yes," she said, "but I want June to hear that this is not a vote she can fail." We told her together. June asked 3 questions: whether Lucia would keep her apartment if counseling became difficult, whether Margaret controlled the venue, and whether there would be badges. The answers were yes, no, and absolutely not. We married at the city conservatory on a Tuesday afternoon with 12 people present. Naomi attended as Lucia's friend, not as operations director. Margaret sat in the second row because June had decided the first row belonged to people who knew where the emergency snacks were kept. At the reception, there was no family portrait platform. We took one photograph beside the greenhouse doors. June stood between us because she wanted to, then stepped away for a second photograph of Lucia and me alone. "You're allowed to be married without proving I'm happy every second," she explained. The adoption process began after the wedding, at June's request, and on a lawyer's ordinary timeline. Lucia did not become June's mother because she tore off a pin. She became legally responsible only after home visits, consent meetings, records, and months in which she kept showing up when nobody was photographing it. 1 year after the gala, June brought a small walnut frame into the kitchen. I recognized my own corner joints, though she had sanded them unevenly at the workshop. The black guest badge rested beneath the glass. Beside it was an empty space the size of Lucia's gold pin. Lucia stood across the table, wearing a warm ivory blouse, with the repaired pin in her palm. "May I?" June asked. Lucia gave it to her. June fastened the pin to Lucia's coat first. The darker clasp held. Then she removed it, placed it beside the torn black satin, and closed the back of the frame. "Which place is correct?" Lucia asked. June handed the frame to me and pinned the gold emblem back on Lucia herself. "Both," she said. "The frame is what happened. You wearing it is what you do next." Lucia looked at me before touching June. I nodded, but June answered for herself by stepping into her arms. I hung the frame in our hallway, not because a guest badge belonged in a family home, but because the tear through its center told the truth. Lucia had opened it with one dramatic choice. Afterward, all 3 of us had spent a year making sure the opening led somewhere. The Harcourts had given my daughter a badge that said she was temporary. We kept it long enough to prove that belonging was never the word printed on it.